Good morning, everyone. Early, bright and early. Welcome to the second day of the EENA Conference 2009. I know it's very early in the morning for some of you. Some of you have had a good night's sleep. I hope you all had a great evening after the 112 Awards. They were outstanding and very fun to watch and very emotional. If you are here for the session about cloud and emergency services, you are in the right place. Otherwise, you have two other sessions to go if you are not interested in the topic. But nevertheless, let's go forward and start with our first speaker. Bill Mertka, he's a very familiar face for the EENA community and for those in North America as well, for the EENA community. He's currently Vice Chair of the EENA Operations and Technical Committee, and he's here to talk to you about the EENA work in that field. Please, Phil. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Whoa, a little stronger than I expected. Obviously, I think everybody can hear me. I'm sure you probably could even hear me without the microphone. Thanks for coming to the session. They asked me to kick off the proceedings this morning with a little discussion about cloud and emergency services from the perspective of EENA's vision and what we intend to do about it from a EENA organizational perspective. What I thought I would start out with, though, and apologize for a little bit of an eye chart here, I thought it was important to establish a baseline, and especially since you'll all get the presentation afterwards, give you something that you can actually read about and try to remember what I spoke about. The topic of cloud and emergency services is something that's been discussed off and on for many years. Some people think it's the salvation of our industry. Others think it's a pipe dream and should be avoided at all costs. Obviously, with all extreme positions, the truth kind of lies somewhere in the middle. But I wanted to put the market stats up just to give people who were skeptical, perhaps, a chance to see the reality of the importance of cloud. At this conference, other conferences you'll go to, anytime advanced technology is talked about, there's a lot of buzzwords that you'll always hear. Cloud, lately AI, machine learning, whatever it might be, and you'll probably hear about those in different sessions throughout this conference as well. The one important takeaway I guess I would like to leave with you is the reality of cloud services, right? So these numbers are from a recent IDC study on just what the market looks like, and this is just public cloud services, right? I mean, without going into tutorial on cloud, there are many different variations. There's private cloud, there's hybrid, there's all sorts of different models. But if you take a look at some of these numbers, right, and I tried to highlight some of them in bold for you, but when you look at the size of the market, the billions of dollars that are involved, from anybody who's been in the product marketing space, product management space like I have for many years, one of the very important pieces up here are the CAGRs, or the annual growth rates for these. If you look at some of these numbers, right, especially in our space, those are pretty impressive. 20 and 30% AGR numbers are pretty indicative of a market that's growing pretty explosively. So especially outside our sector, and I've spent the last year actually working for a cloud services company that focuses on things other than public safety. Cloud is the major technology imperative of the last couple of years and will be going forward. It'll be impossible for anybody in this particular sector to ignore. So deciding what your proper posture is relative to cloud services is going to be important for everybody in this room, whether you manage a center, provide technology solutions, whatever it might be. It's important to realize just how big that this is. Obviously, cloud encompasses a lot of different areas, and so trying to sort that out is important. Software as a service, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, the classic models for cloud computing all have a role to play in public safety and emergency services. And it'll be up to each individual agency and organization to decide how much and where something like this makes sense to you. But the important point above all is this isn't something you can ignore or something that you can wait for or something that you can push down the line. So just two real quick slides here and then a conclusion before we get into the meat of the other speakers. I thought it was beneficial for, again, those people in the room who wanted to delve a little deeper or try to understand what are some of the benefits and what are some of the pitfalls potentially in deploying this type of technology. I think some of these, again, most of the people, anybody who's done their homework or heard anything or read or tried to keep up with cloud services have heard some of these. Obviously, cost savings and pay per use are key parts of the value proposition. One of the big issues with premise-based infrastructure deployment especially is always trying to guess how much capacity you need. For years in IT, the rule has always been to provision for peak loads, and then we end up having extra capacity around because the everyday 11-month load is way less than what we need for, right? So that's always led to overspend, it's led to overpromise. It's always been hard to get resource aligned with the actual activity. One of the freeing realities of cloud is the ability to run workloads on-premise in a co-location space, in a cloud, wherever business, your business, which in our business is, the business of saving lives and protecting life and property, we're constrained by the way things have always been done. Other sectors have discovered the freedom of cloud, and this is something that will become a reality for us. It already is, right? There are certainly vendors out there today in our space that have made cloud the basis of what they do. You're only going to see more of this, right? Obviously, one of the key issues, and then you'll see this one on both slides, which I think is interesting, and I'll explain that in a minute. People have talked about security of data, security of system, been wondering about how secure are public cloud facilities. Obviously, it's important to note that from a security standpoint, some of these companies deploy technologies and spend time thinking about security in ways that even the largest public safety agency just could never touch. So the security argument is sometimes a bit of a red herring, but it's important to realize that you still have to match what you need to do, how you need to do it, to what's provided by some of these providers and some of the vendors that use these infrastructure providers to provide solutions to us in our space. When it comes to concerns, right, again, and with only 15 minutes, I can just scratch barely the surface on a lot of this. But probably one of the biggest concerns, and one of the things that especially in our space is important, is the issue of data sovereignty, especially with new security and data privacy regulations here in Europe and around the world, this being an increasingly important topic. The idea of where is the data stored and what your laws and regulations dictate that you have to follow in the public safety space is very important. Security and updates, I put that up there again, it's a little tongue-in-cheek, but the point is that there are good things in security in the cloud, in the public sector, or the public cloud space, but again, you always have to do your homework and make sure that the particular way that it's implemented, where data is stored, how things are protected, matches your particular requirements. So it's one of those key issues that you really have to really watch for. And one of the things that I learned in my recent history here that is absolutely important and is really kind of the killer that sneaks up on everybody in every sector when it comes to cloud, especially public cloud, and you have to make sure that any vendor that's using public cloud has masked some of this complexity from you, is complex billing and pricing arrangements, right? One of the dirty little secrets about public cloud systems, and this applies to a lot of them, and perhaps we do have a speaker from one of the leading public cloud vendors that's on the panel here. He may be able to answer more questions about this a little bit later, but it's very easy to get data and systems spun up in the cloud. Sometimes it's expensive and complicated to get data out, so you really do need to have people on staff or a good vendor that understands how these new systems are used, or there's plenty of gotchas in the financial arena once you've deployed something like this. So these are just some of the things that we have to be concerned about. So the bottom line of what I was here to talk about is just say that we at EENA realize that our members, especially those at our public safety authorities, are going to need some sort of guidance to be able to understand and chart a proper course with regard to cloud services and their effective use in emergency services and public safety. So, recognizing that that's the case, I wanted to be able to let folks know that part of our work plan for 2019 is to produce a document specifically about cloud and emergency services. What are the important considerations for people in the space? Elaborating on those strengths and weaknesses that I talked about in the slide previous, and This document should be available according to the work plan in the fourth quarter. We'll do a public introduction and webinar about the document. We're planning somewhere around the November timeframe. And so I guess more than anything else, as an introduction to this particular session, and just to let people know that, EENA is very aware of the importance of this topic. We're very aware of the fact that specific guidance for public safety and emergency services may not be as prevalent in the general and generic cloud literature as it probably could or should be, and that we intend to address that issue by working on some documentation, providing that to the community, and hopefully providing some good advice and information, not unlike what we did with cybersecurity last year. I think yesterday we had a session where Christina and others talked about what EENA had done with regard to cybersecurity, another super important space, and some documentation that we worked on in the last year to provide some practical guidelines for public safety and emergency services organizations. We want to do the same thing here for cloud services. So that's really all I wanted to provide, was a little bit of a introduction to how important cloud is, make sure that everybody understood that it's not something that can be ignored, let you know what our plans were, and serve as a general introduction for our other speakers. So thank you, Iratxe, for the floor, and I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. It's very good to start the session with 5 minutes left for your presentation, so we have a bit more time for questions and answers from the floor. Any questions? Raise your hand and we'll pass a microphone to you. No questions? Then I have one. From your perception and experience, do you find extremely hard to convince some emergency services to give sovereignty about their data, maybe in a private cloud, a hybrid cloud, or public cloud somehow?
I think in general, if I understand your question, I've found in my experience that public safety people who have responsibility for technology are definitely less convinced of the value of cloud than other sectors. Having spent the last year, like I said, very involved with other non-public safety sectors, it's not a question in most other industries as to whether this is important or not. They're all doing it. The growth rates are crazy. You can't be an IT professional in any other sector and say you're going to ignore the cloud. It usually is a short ticket to an early end of your career. Though we tend to persist in that, in being a little bit skeptical, and that's why I put the particular challenges that were on my challenge slide in here. And one of the biggest issues is exactly the one that you mentioned, which is data sovereignty. It seems to come up more and more often. One of the things that even in the non-public safety sector that I know is frustrating for customers, I experienced this myself as a customer of one of the large cloud vendors that we resold, which is that for very good reasons, cloud vendors tend to not tell anybody where their data centers are. Not naming names or pointing any accusatory fingers, but the big three, and again, we have a big three speaker here. He may be able to tell me that I'm wrong. I hope maybe that's the case. I certainly know that one of his competitors doesn't even tell half of their people where their actual data centers are, and even if they do happen to know where they're at, nobody can really visit them. It's pretty walled off, and it's for reasons that I mentioned, for security. So the whole issue of data sovereignty is definitely one of those things that could crimp public cloud adoption in our space, and it's probably a message, and it's good that, again, we have people in the room from the cloud vendors. They probably heard this loud and clear from their customers. Knowing more about where data is stored, how it's maintained, the nationalities. As an example, in the U.S., with the FBI CJIS policy, people have had to wall off sectors of their cloud and manage it with only U.S.-based nationals in order to get government agencies like police departments and others in order to pass some of the data sovereignty and other rules. So yeah, it's definitely been an issue in my experience.
Do we have time? I'll just jump in because I'm with Microsoft, Kirk Arthur, and then we have a question there. But yeah, data sovereignty is a huge issue, and for Microsoft, we're very transparent. We'll tell you where our data centers are. We'll do visits to our data centers. We have a government security program where we invite customers into specific environments to look at our source code, because we take security and trust so sincere and important for the trust factor and the engagement. To really the idea is to get rid of that so you can really leverage cloud computing to really transform how you do your businesses. So I'll get into it a little bit.
And that was the answer I was hoping for from you, Kirk, so thanks.
And there is a question in the audience. Please, James.
So Bill, I can see that cloud offers good things in terms of survivability and things like that, because you can spin up new environments if you've got extra load, etc. In my experience with cloud, storage is super expensive, like more expensive than actually keeping it on site once your database or your data grows to any reasonable size. And we know that in the PSAP environment, you've got to do stacks of recording, right? So at the moment it's audio, but video's coming. And once you start getting multiple video streams coming in and you've got to store them all, you're talking significant amounts of data. So it seems to me that in order to be able to address that in a reasonable pricing structure, you're probably going to need to pull some of that back on premises or to something like that. So potentially you've now got more complicated IT structure than you had before. And that adds to cost so the cost saving that you get in one area may well be exceeded by the cost of reasonable professionals in another area.
Yeah, well, I think the point that you make, James, and I guess I was a tad remiss by not mentioning hybrid architectures. That's the reality in every other sector, and it'll be the reality in ours. I mean, you make very good points about that. That was why I mentioned the cost and the billing issue. And again, Kirk, being from one of the providers, might be able to talk a little bit more in detail. I just came off of actually pricing an object storage offer to the other markets before I came here, and the price of cloud-based storage, people sometimes talk about, again, the issue with cloud, it's not getting it in, it's egress cost. That's an issue for a lot of cloud providers. When you talk about the type of volumes that you're discussing, though, trying to maintain petabyte type storage on site has its own issues, right? Which is why there's been a rush to the cloud for a lot of people. The cloud can introduce complexity and it can introduce cost, but again, if you engage people who really understand the business, I think it can provide more benefits than keeping everything on premise. So,
Thank you very much, Bill, and all the. We'll leave questions for the end. We will have more time in the end for questions for all presenters. Again, thank you very much, Bill. Our next presenter is Kirk Arthur from Microsoft. He's Managing Director on Business Development for Worldwide Public Safety and Justice. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Yeah, if I could just follow up on the storage. I mean, it's interesting to hear that because storage, from our perspective, is really a race to the bottom for pricing. So I think how you classify your data, hot, cool, cold, how you do that, if you want to even archive and tape, it's just, I think that's a candid conversation with whoever your cloud vendor is to understand the mission needs and requirements of accessing that data. Obviously, if you're hitting it all the time in hot storage, yeah, it's going to spin the meter. We'll love it, but it's probably not necessary, right? If it's just cold and you're just archiving it because you have a requirement to store it for 7 years, man, put that on tape and maintaining the cloud and leveraging those economy of scales, that's what you really want to take advantage of. So whoever your cloud provider is, we could have discussions offline about that, if it's not us. All right. So listen, my name's Kirk Arthur. I look after Microsoft's global public safety and justice business. I am not a technologist. I've been enrolled for about 4 years. I came from U.S. federal law enforcement, where I spent 15 years. And prior to that, I was a police officer in the state of Washington. So I'm very much an operational guy. Technology absolutely has a role to play in the first responder space. And I'll give you my perspective over the next 15 or so minutes about what we're seeing in the market around the world. And cloud does offer enormous opportunities. There's a lot of friction. There's we call it FUD, the fear, the uncertainty, and the doubt of adopting new technologies, especially in law enforcement. People hate change. Cops really hate change, but there's a real opportunity to transform how they deliver services in the PSAP space, emergency call centers, how you can really deliver new efficiencies that are really kind of unprecedented, and cloud lets you do that. So let's begin with just, simply the state of the world, right? Everything's being connected. And this is a good thing, it's a bad thing. For law enforcement, my last 4 years with the federal government, we did post-data breach investigations when business systems, government systems were breached, trying to chase cyber criminals around the world. Very difficult, very challenging to bring them to justice. The more and more devices get connected, we're seeing refrigerators, ovens, things being used in DDoS attacks because they're not secure. this ubiquity era that we're entering, you do need to leverage cloud for your world. If you think about your environment where you live, breathe, and function in as a public safety agency, think about all your endpoints. Think about your citizens as sensors, things that you can start bringing into your environment and using advanced compute AI technology to rationalize and make sense of that data and really only surface what you need to know about, to react on, to keep that white noise at bay so you're making real-time operational decisions. That's where we see the market going as things start pushing forward. You know, these kind of 4 big buckets that we think about here, think about big data, especially government agencies around the world. Data is the new oil. People like to say, you have a ton of data. A lot of it's sitting isolated. You need to start harvesting that information, getting some business insights to that. Past behavior dictates future opportunities, and what are you going to do as a business to pursue those things? Cloud computing, huge reluctance around the world for adopting cloud technology. We get it at Microsoft. We're a US-based company. We're overseas. We have 100+ data centers around the world. It's a massive investment for us, but there's always that fear, like you know, with the Edward Snowden files from years ago with the National Security Agency. Hey, is Microsoft going to give access to the US federal government for our data? With the advancement of the Cloud Act, that creates a new dynamic that's beneficial to foreign entities as well as the United States. And back to that government security program discussion I had, we are overly transparent and extremely candid about our engagements, and your data is your data, and we've actually taken the US federal government all the way up to the Supreme Court to protect data overseas and make sure they follow appropriate global protocols. So it's a huge investment for us in that space. 5G technology. Obviously 5G is not going to be in the rural networks around the world, but 5G in the urban environment I think creates a huge opportunity. Think about this bigger pipe for your first responders, when your fire services, your police services, your ambulance services responding in the field and having some level of connectivity with 5G, the ability to start offloading data while you're in transit versus going back to the station and clunking in your body-worn camera or other devices and syncing that way, being able to do that over a mesh network creates unprecedented opportunities, especially when you think about natural disasters, you think about active shooter scenarios, those types of events where, you know, as an incident commander, you have real-time view into what's happening. You're making real-time adjustments to your resources and having better insights on what you're working on. That is a distinct advantage because we all know first responders, it's reactionary, right? It's been reactionary for centuries. If we can collapse response times by integrating systems and having better viewpoints, we're starting to change the dynamic of that situation, and we're starting to dictate the outcome and ultimately, hopefully, preserving lives. Artificial intelligence, you have to look at artificial intelligence. Don't think about driverless cars or robots. That's kind of just, you know, media fodder. You got to think about translation services, transcription services, redaction services, things that can greatly enhance your staff, the work that they do. It's a force multiplier. AI is not a replacement of your staff. AI simplifies the workload. Facial recognition, super sensitive topic around the world. When you think about you have a suspect that's on in the community, you have to be on the lookout alert for them. If you have a database of 3,000 people, you shouldn't expect your staff to physically go through 3,000 people. You should be able to leverage artificial intelligence to find 5 likely candidates and let your staff look at that person. That's the opportunity that AI presents in the modern era for us. For us, for Microsoft, trusted cloud, and as you consider cloud, really challenge your providers. We will walk as deep in, from a technical perspective, from a compliance perspective, from a security perspective as you want to go. I will candidly say you are more secure in our cloud environment than you can possibly be on premises. You simply can't do it. I'm going to show a video of Satya Nadella, our CEO, and Brad Smith, our president and chief legal officer. You're going to hear him talk about this is a $1 billion a year investment for Microsoft on research and development just around cybersecurity. It's our environment. It's how we perform and protect our assets. It's how we protect our customers' assets and how we protect our partner assets using our technology. And this is an ongoing dynamic environment. Cybersecurity is pervasive. It's always shifting. You got to be nimble. And no cloud provider should say, hey, go to my cloud, you won't get breached, because that's not true. It's how deep can they get into your systems, how many tripwires before they get activated. And because we use our own artificial intelligence and the telemetry we get from our ecosystem, that we're able to really kind of know quickly who's in our system and what we need to do to eradicate that, and we keep shifting, we keep evolving, and it's got to be this public-private partnership as part of our investments in that space, and then the compliance posture. So these 4 buckets here: security, privacy, and control. Again, your data is your data. We don't even want to know the content. You know, I remember a few years ago I was in New Zealand, meeting with New Zealand Police Service, and one of their senior commanders was he's asking about what's in it for Microsoft, what's in it for Microsoft. My question to him was, Do you think if somebody gets arrested on their drive to the jail that they're going to get a notification about the closest bail bonds company, like an advertisement? That's not our business. We don't care about that data, right? We want you to leverage the capabilities of cloud to be efficient, to get stuff off premises and improve your cyber hygiene. You know, we don't want to do the content aspect of it. That's, again, and to build to your point about data sovereignty, you're picking through our ecosystem, how we architected our Azure fabric, you're picking your regions. Your data is not going to just be sharded and balanced across our global infrastructure. You're picking the domains and where that's going to reside. So compliance, another big strength for us. Wherever your data is, whatever country you're in, if you think about in the EU, model clauses, United States with CGIS, FedRAMP, all these other certifications, everybody's going to do the commercial, the ISO, and all those workloads and certification, but we keep pushing the envelope because, again, we don't want compliance to be a blocker. And especially countries where we don't have data centers, it just simply won't make a business sense for us. It's very expensive to build these data centers. So where there's not a data center, what does it look like? That hybrid scenario has to be considered for all public safety agencies around the world is, what data can I keep on premises or I need to? What data can I leverage cloud technology? Or can I pull learning models down from the cloud, AI models, into my environment and still leverage some capacity and some capabilities? It's a partnership discussion again. The days, like at least for Microsoft, of hey, buy a bunch of licenses from us and we'll see you later, see you in 3 years when those licenses expire, those days are gone. This is a partnership. We're learning mode from you guys and we'll keep listening and keep iterating and make adjustments as much as we can. And then transparency, metal fails, right? So when we have to do maintenance for our data centers, if it infects your VM, you're gonna know about it. And if you wanna physically be there while we do the maintenance on it, you're gonna be there. It's that dialogue, that discussion we wanna make sure we're doing in that space. So let me show the video from Satya. I will say from my four short years in Microsoft, seeing the CEO and the president for permeating down, we're a 100,000+ member company. We have offices around the world. Cybersecurity is at the heart of everything we do. The engagements that people do and the automation, I've been really impressed. I have a very prescriptive pattern in my travels around the world. I've been to Brazil, Australia, and now Croatia the last 4 weeks. The system understands where I'm at. If there was a login in a different location that knows I'm here, using AI to elevate that to our cyber defense operations center so they can start isolating the problem. That's the telemetry. When you think about your field-based staff in public safety, having that perspective and capability is really critical to it. So let me show the video.
It is a tumultuous and even turbulent time in which we live. The contents of any computing device today contain the privacies of life.
This is our new approach, a new platform, new intelligence, and new partnerships.
As a company, we're focused on taking a holistic approach, protecting, detecting, and responding to security threats. An approach that starts with identity and then considers devices and applications and infrastructure and data itself.
We spend over $1 billion of R&D each year in building security into our mainstream products. It's not just the technology that we deliver, it is the platform technology coupled with intelligence.
We have trillions of data points coming in from billions of endpoints, and it's that ability to understand and gain insight and take action from that data that can make all the difference.
And we share that intelligence broadly with our customers, with our partners, so that we can collectively secure our environment. This is not just about Microsoft, this is about us working together as an ecosystem.
And when you think about the emergency call center space, think about in Baltimore and Atlanta last year, United States, their systems went down, ransomware. They weren't ready. They're dispatching on pieces of paper. That cyber resilience, you have to think about this. You have to think about your old infrastructure that's on premises and how you're maintaining that. Are you losing track of appliances? We would investigate that all the time with the federal government. Oh, I forgot a patch on this server. Well, it leads to problems. Reputational damage plus PII gets released, all sorts of issues. In the era of GDPR, you need to understand what that looks like, what your ecosystem looks like, and start simplifying that. Let us handle some of that burden as a cloud vendor, and so you can worry about line of business applications. So that's kind of the cyber stuff. I want to pivot to just the industry itself. And I think this first thing here, information silos. There is so much information that sits on premises for law enforcement agencies and public safety agencies around the world. It sits isolated. You know, I need an RMS system, so I have an RMS server. I need a CAD server, so I got my CAD server. Nothing's talking together now. So the era now of cloud technology, having a data lake environment where I can have my CAD system, my RMS system, my open source intelligence, I can have this environment start sharing information and using business logic and business sense, so I can start being more efficient with the use of my staff and personnel. We're not going to hire ourselves out of first responders, right? We need to make our existing resources more efficient, more effective, develop infrastructures and capabilities so they're actually in the field more than they're back at the station. When I was a young officer, I remember paper would pile up in my right front seat of my passenger, my police car. I'd be driving around looking at it. At some point, I had to come off the road and write my reports. Then they put a laptop in my car. I was like, this is awesome. So I'm in the field, at least writing reports, so I could be that visual deterrent. It's those capabilities that we got to think about in that space. Multi-channel communication, really it's the omni-channel now. You think of the ubiquity about how PSAPs and emergency response organizations communicate and how citizens, the people you serve, how do they digest information? Most people aren't calling emergency numbers right now. They're texting, it's social media platforms. If you have a robust bi-directional relationship with your constituents and your community, there's no better platform to push out messages like, hey, there's a hurricane or a typhoon or a flooding, stay away from this area. So you don't have people coming in adding to the problem. You can start directing them away from the threat or the danger area. It's just having that healthy relationship and working through it is a real opportunity. 1 minute, oh my goodness, I've got to speed up. All right, I know. For this, again, connecting agencies, having that capability there, not just your frontline staff, giving them the tools. You might have an idea as an IT staff, hey, if I give them computers or smartphones, they're gonna do this with these workloads. But what you're gonna find is your staff, you give them those tools, you give them the infrastructure to do that, they're gonna start doing really wonderful things you didn't even think of, but you gave them the opportunity to evolve and develop those things in that space. I touched a little bit on this, the disruptive technologies. I do think translation, transcription in the emergency call center, there's a real opportunity there to really change how that performs and behaves. When I was a young officer, if someone spoke a foreign language, I'd speak really loud in English thinking they would understand me, right? And they wouldn't. So then I'd call the dispatch center, we'd get language services, I'd hand my cell phone to the individual, maybe there was a suspect, there was a contentious relationship. I didn't want to have that dialogue. If I could have a translation app on my phone and carry out a conversation, that exists today. This isn't future looking, the opportunity's there. Oops. I'm gonna show a quick video at the end right now, because it's a good video. Just real quick, the work we did with San Diego Sheriff's Office, doing a chatbot for their officers in their cars, in their cruisers. It took 5 days. We do what's called hackathons. And so there's an iteration session, and you actually build it out. Because these framework models, because of cloud technology, you can deploy and iterate over these really quickly and have an end result that's fantastic. So I'm gonna show the video, hopefully not get in trouble.
Coptivity is this idea that voice interface is becoming a natural way for people to work.
Instead of calling dispatch where they call in a license plate number that could take up to 30 minutes, they can easily just say the license plate number, which goes to a chatbot using cognitive services.
Adam 12, go ahead.
Chris would transcribe that information, and then from there that will go to the Lewis service in Azure, which then understands that the deputy is intending to run the registered owner.
Property successfully queried. Your plate is 1129 exempt by statute for last of Zalt, first of Tiffany on a 71 Chev.
Giving an officer, a deputy, better situational awareness in the moment, because now he's keeping his eyes on the situation, immediately give the plates, and then get information before he even steps out of the car.
It also saves the time of dispatchers so they can focus on more complex queries.
With the captivity, they don't need to call anymore. So in a couple of minutes, they can have their results, and that will be amazing, and in some scenarios, life-saving.
Utilizing Lewis and the different software available on the Azure stack is what makes this possible.
We're looking at Azure to really transform what we do and how we do it and bring new innovations to the table.
When you can use the new tools and services that technology is providing and make everything easier, faster, and more efficient to your end users.
So I'll skip over, I'll close off on this. Again, cloud lets you're not ripping and replacing what you've invested in. What you do is you're enhancing your investments in that infrastructure. And you look at this curate middle portion there, using cloud technology to really add some horsepower to what your on-premises environment is. So Microsoft, we're very much in a learning mode and iterating and learning from you as customers. And I invite, please visit us at our booth. We can go a little bit deeper on some of these topics. We have some engineering and other resources here, and love to have the conversation. So we'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kirk. So we have a couple of minutes for a quick question. There's two questions. I think there's just two questions. Go ahead, please.
Just throw the mic back there so make him catch it.
Good morning. Thank you. I've seen that Microsoft has two regions especially formed for data protection guidelines or special regulations. The one is the Asia region for the US government, and the other one is Asia-Germany. But Asia-Germany region is open for every company, for every government, for every institution in the EU and EFTA. Is there any special reason why it is the region Germany and not the EU region, especially done for EU governments? Are there any plans to build a second government cloud, a closed government cloud for the EU governments?
Yeah, so you're talking about our US sovereign government cloud. Quite honestly, I think if you asked Microsoft leadership, we probably wouldn't do the Azure Government Cloud again because the security controls we have in Azure is the security controls we have in Azure. The US is a little bit different because we have cleared US personnel and US citizens in those data centers. But when you start looking out at virtual data centers and virtual security, virtual VMs, the security controls are there to meet everybody's requirements. So the need to build data centers in a sovereign instance doesn't really make business sense for us. Germany is a great example. You know, we're replatforming that to be just part of the Azure fabric. Azure's Azure for us. The security investments, it's all there. I'll say in the Azure Government Cloud in the US, from a technology and capability standpoint, it actually lags the Azure Commercial Cloud for some of the capabilities just by how it was designed. And so we're kind of playing catch up in that space. So I think we've probably confused the market a little bit, but the security posture is the same all over. So in the EU, you think about, we announced the Switzerland data centers. We got data centers in Norway that are going to come online. We always have Amsterdam and Ireland's been our big ones. Germany will come online, France. We're going to invest in the big markets for sure, but I don't think you're going to see us do a sovereign data center for the EU. It just doesn't make business sense.
Thank you. One very quick question, please.
Hi, Mike. Hi, Michael Pressler from GridGears. I would be interested in what's your personal perception of where the market is in terms of knowledge, what the cloud is. You know, reaching from it's just a place where I can store my VMs like a normal virtualizer, up to where I see the real benefits are in terms of leveraging the services like Cosmos DB, AKS, all of that stuff. So what's your perception where we are?
I think public safety is probably 10 years behind. Honestly, and law enforcement I think is the worst. I'll tell you, you guys are doing more in Europe than your colleagues are in the US. It's funny because we host businesses all the time, both foreign and US in our campus in Redmond, and even in the court space. People come in the US customers, and we'll do this presentation. I'll show all the global examples of cloud adoption and how agencies are using it, and they come in with this bias like, hey, we're the US, we're advanced, and afterwards they'll tell me like, we're behind. I go, yeah, you are, right? And so, I think public safety as a whole, no one likes change. And some of it is leadership. Some people just simply need to retire, if you think about it. I'll give you an anecdotal story, then I'll stop, is when I was at headquarters of Secret Service back in 2006, one of my assistant directors told me, Kirk, I think computers are a fad. He thought they were gonna go away. I was like, sir, I think you need to retire. So you do run into that. It exists in the market, and you need the next generation of thought leader to take over and really start pushing the envelope. So.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, next speaker is Kirk Isherwood from Apd Communications. He is the managing director. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Thank you. Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about smart cities. Just before I do, a lot of of what both Bill and Kirk have said resonated with me and my company. We actually have a product sat on our stand actually that's sat in Microsoft Azure and can sit in both public and private cloud. So if you want to see a product, pop over to the stand and we'll show you. We are control room focused, and I'm going to whiz through some of these slides, but we are control room focused. That's what we're passionate about. That's what we do. We have, I think it's 10 UK police forces actually already using the cloud with us. I think the fear around cloud is lessening as security increases. Some of the sectors that we cover, emergency services, airports, transport, military, quite a few sectors are adopting cloud. But this is what we focus on, which is 999, 911, 101, 112 type calls coming through the control rooms, but control rooms are shifting and changing. And when we talk about cloud, a lot of what we focused on today is about centralizing computing, and that's the version of cloud we talk about quite often. But one of the things that we do quite a lot is we integrate various different devices into the control room. So be that telephony, radio, we're one of the leaders from an LTE perspective now. A lot of these different devices are coming through and needing connecting as well. So there's not just one cloud provider, but multiple cloud providers that need to be aggregated, and they need to talk. And we're going to face the same kind of integration problems that we've faced in the past by actually having technology on site. So it kind of shifts the problem slightly. But I'll talk about some of the solutions moving forward. Now, one of the things that Kirk said is that he's obviously from an operational policing background. One of the things that it's easy to get wrapped up in is that cloud is a technology thing, and we forget actually that cloud is just an enabler for the operational aspects of public safety and the public sector in general. So one of the things that we have done is we introduced the Control Room Awards to celebrate the heroes in the control rooms, and International Control Room Week that many people here actually have commented that they got involved in. So it's important. I just wanted to flash these slides up just so that we remember that the operational aspects are also quite critical to consider. It's not just a technology thing. Right, on to some trends. So here is what we see in terms of future trends. So as it stands today, 95% of teenagers use Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. My daughter is actually almost 13 years old, and she WhatsApped me whilst sat next to me on the sofa. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that will resonate with people who have children. That is how society is headed. Okay, right now people actually, people as in, you and I, call an emergency number to interact with the public sector. Moving forward, is my daughter going to do that? A lot of times, especially in the UK and Europe, people are first and foremost reporting crime on Twitter and Facebook and uploading videos to YouTube before it's even reported to a control room. So it's important for us to recognize that various cloud platforms will play a future in the control room. Finding ways to integrate and leverage that kind of information is critical and crucial. Another interesting stat, 1 in 3 elderly people, and this is a European stat actually, will fall at least once per year. Now I have elderly parents now, My father's fallen once, and my mother has actually fallen 3 times. And the likelihood of them needing to go to the hospital is quite great. So I don't know how many people have got an Apple Watch or a similar kind of device, but nowadays, if you do have a nasty fall, you know, you can now call somebody automatically. It says, it seems you've had a fall, and, you know, do you need to contact someone? And you click yes. So this is a form of IoT. It's a device. So, you know, there is a strong prediction that in control rooms, it won't just be people with their devices, i.e. WhatsApp or things like that, that are contacting the emergency services in particular. It will be devices without their people. Alexa and other smart home devices, actually by 2021, will outnumber the number of smartphone devices in the world, which is just an incredible stat for me. So, you know, people are embracing the Internet of Things at home, at work, and we've got to make sure that we are working on platforms that can integrate to those kinds of devices. Another interesting stat, by 2025, voice over IP will take over traditional ISDN lines and similar fixed lines. How are we going to deal with location? Right now in the UK, 3% of calls actually come in via voice over IP devices, and we have no idea where those people are as it stands today. So we've got to look at a standards-based approach. 2030 will see an 11% increase in global population. And actually there's a really interesting trend, and I'll just jump to the right-hand side of the slide. There will be a 72% rise in urbanization. That's people moving towards city centres. Now imagine the kind of challenges that London, New York, Berlin and other places, Paris, that are all built up, and the challenges that the control rooms and emergency services have, locating people, getting to see those people. We are going to need more and more assistance in terms of technology to give critical data as to where those people are located and what kind of help they need and what the most appropriate resources are. By 2036, almost a quarter of the population will be of a pensionable age. They probably won't be able to retire, by the way, because not many people can nowadays, but 25% of people will be of a pensionable age. That's going to shift demand in the control room again, and it's going to shift demand of first-line responders as well in terms of the types of incidents that they have to respond to. And almost 50 million people between 16 and 64 will have smartphone devices. So we've got to cater for IoT in the control room. A few more interesting stats for you. In terms of greenhouse gases throughout the world, this is a big topic and has been for a while. It's going to increase regardless of all the efforts that we're putting in. It is going to increase. That's going to impact cities significantly. There's going to be monitoring devices that are already being implemented actually, but again, IoT devices measuring and monitoring the greenhouse gases. There's going to be a significant increase in demand for the basics like water. Now, as we see that shift in urbanization, those basic utilities that we just take for granted right now will become quite strained. And that will start to impact things like security threats. We've actually stopped a number of terrorist threats trying to poison water sources. Like we say, the urban population is increasing significantly. How are we going to cope for that? Energy as well. So in the UK and around the world, control rooms have to respond to power station demands where you have people that are trying to sabotage traditional methods of power creation. The demand for food is going to increase. So there's a significant demand that's coming, that we have to make sure that we have the technology available to assist, because just adding more people in, it's not going to help solve some of these problems. And a lot of these problems are being tackled in isolation through IoT type devices. But how do we integrate those things? So I've got a short video that I just wanted to play to you. It's 2 minutes long, but it's about something called Fireware. And it's something that I think everyone should be aware of. And this is an open standards approach to smart cities, something that we're working with and our parent company, NEC, is also working with.
We are approaching a new digital revolution. More than half of the world's population has an internet connection, resulting in continuous streams of data generated by the technologies we use in our day-to-day lives. The Internet of Things is impacting virtually all stages of economy and social life, representing a profound change in how humans interact with machines, information, and even each other. The increasing maturity of big data, cloud solutions, and new internet-connected devices have created an exciting and valuable opportunity to build the next generation of data-driven smart solutions. Information coming from multiple sources must be accessible in real time, creating a digital continuum. Breaking down boundaries between domains will enable the exchange of relevant data across multiple applications, avoiding the current silos of information. Fireware is driving the standards to make all this happen, unleashing the potential of real-time open data at a large scale. It simplifies IoT, allowing developers to merge IoT data with data from other relevant sources and get access to it using well-defined RESTful APIs, reducing both the time and cost of development for IoT-enabled smart solutions. Thanks to harmonized data models and APIs, developers are able to create applications that are truly interoperable. Real-time data exported in a city can be combined with data from vehicles acting as mobile sensors to enable new services and improve processes like predictive maintenance of fleets and roads. Systems associated to milling and coordinate measuring machines in a factory can exchange data in a trustworthy manner for a better performance. Fireware ensures the sovereignty on data, allowing the appropriate levels of access to data to be defined, for instance, for potential monetization. Data from vehicles can be published on a data marketplace supported by the city, so it can be monetized when used by third-party developers. Fireware Context Information Management is the basis for the new data economy and the creation of innovative business models in multi-sided markets. Join us to ensure that standards are driven by the needs of all society and to ensure that Fireware will stay free for all, forever.
Okay, so for the techies in the room, this will look familiar, but for the non-techies, I'll try and do my best to explain what this slide is. So ultimately, the bottom layer is about data collection and distribution. So this is about open standards. It's about not tying you into a single thing. It's about sharing what they call APIs, or application programming interfaces. So this is about data collection and distribution. The center layer is all about, similar to what Microsoft was saying, big data and analytic tools. So this is about an abstraction layer. This is about taking in that data and making it usable and shareable. There is an API layer, thank you. API layer as well, and that allows your organizations, any organizations, to be able to interact with this open standard. And then finally you have the top layer, which is about systems management. So this is all of your graphical user interfaces and services that you may present to other people, and applications that you would use to control this platform. So in conclusion, just to wrap up, from a control room perspective, retaining staff and knowledge is absolutely crucial. So make sure that you are looking after your staff and keeping them as long as possible. As much as sometimes they're a little bit anti-tech, they'll come around as long as they can see the benefit to the operation itself. Recruit tech-savvy people, graduates in particular. You know, the more you get those coming through, the more technology will be embraced. Insist on open source. Don't get locked into a single platform. And from a technology provider's perspective, I would encourage you to review Fireware, take a look at the NEC smart city solutions as well, and just do as much research as you can. This might feel like it's a long way away, but it really isn't. It's happening now, and we've got to move with the trend. So just finally, my contact details are there. There's a few links to the things that I've mentioned, including the video, which didn't really show particularly well on the screen, but there's a few links there that I thought I would share. So with that, I'm done.
Thank you very much, Mike. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. One question, please. Any question from the audience? Yes, James? Make it short, please. Yeah. No, you don't need to press anything.
Well, okay, that's better. You put two interesting statistics up there. The first one was the one for 2019, where 95% of children are, or the younger generation, are using messenger applications for communication. I can speak for exactly the same issue that you've just had, that my 20-year-old daughter never uses the telephone. And then you had an interesting stat which said that, hey, you know, by 2025 we're going to have VoIP. And that's clearly what most of the next generation emergency services stuff is moving towards. But it seems to me that with those two statistics, effectively we're producing something which already won't meet the needs of the public in terms of communication. How do you see that and the resolution of that with cloud and going into your control systems, given that these new apps can spring up overnight, right? So if you look at WhatsApp, it went from non-existent to dominating everything within the space of 18 months, 2 years, and we're seeing the same with new apps coming out all the time.
Okay, good question. Technologies are springing up all the time, and they rapidly become popular. The only way to cope with that, in my view, and I think in many people's view in the industry, is APIs and open standards. It's actually being open to working with other technology providers instead of trying to lock people down and own a space. And Microsoft do this actually fantastically well. They open up. They have these hackathons. We work with Microsoft. Lots of people do. We work with lots of other people as well. Fireware is another one. These open standards and APIs are the only way to cope with the rapid shift and change in technology. Only way.
Fantastic answer.
Thank you very much, all three presenters, for the presentation. If I may ask you for a final round of applause. And if you want to know more about dynamic management of emergency vehicles, you can stay here. If you want to know about quality assurance and call takers and dispatchers training, you can go to track 1. Thank you very much for coming.